Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Rob De Los Santos, Growth and Partnerships Lead at objkt.com. Rob is joining us today to chat about the state of NFTs and digital art in 2025 and Object's ongoing rise to prominence in this fascinating and rapidly evolving space. Hi, Rob. Where are you right now and how's the weather?
How's it going, Stu? I'm doing well. I'm in the Columbus, Ohio area. It's probably about 50 degrees or so right now, a little bit on the chilly, colder side, but it's fine for me. I like cold weather.
Perfect. As we always do here on TezTalks Live, can you get the ball rolling by telling us a bit about your background and how you got started on your journey into the exciting world of blockchain technology?
Yeah, so my journey started around November, December of 2020. At that point in time, prior to working full time in Web3, I used to work in college football, doing recruiting and graphic design. Started with a small junior college, and then like 2017, 2018, worked at Michigan State as an assistant graphic designer with the football team in 2019. 2020 was at Bowling Green, and then transitioned over to Army West Point as my last role, where I was the director of content marketing and recruiting. So around that time, there was a friend of mine who worked at Ohio State for the football team. He used to tweet about, was tweeting about NFTs, and I didn't necessarily know about it. I was too wrapped up in my world and football recruiting and graphics and marketing. And near the end of the season, he started tweeting about it. I noticed that people are giving him, like crap for it. And I didn't understand that because a lot of times when he shared his work, like it would go viral. Super talented. So that caught my attention. And then I did a little bit of research, and it just made sense for me. But it wasn't until after the season, around February, March of 2021, where I got to do a deep dive, and it completely blew my mind. I think the fact that an artist could be paid past the initial transaction just completely just blew my mind. I thought it was fascinating. It could allow artists to, another means to earn a living from their art. So I then dove into different marketplaces, found Nifty Gateway, OpenSea, Super Rare, Maker's Place, some other marketplaces, but didn't take the first dive until I purchased on Nifty Gateway because it allowed you to use a credit card, debit card. So I remember when I purchased the artwork, like stalking my bank statement for like the next 48 hours. I was like, well, if this is a scam, I guess I could just call my credit card company, and they'll just like lock it or issue me another one. There's no harm done. And nothing happened after 48 hours. So I was like, okay, I guess this is legit. So I started to do a little bit more research into it. I joined the Nifty Gateway Discord, I think April of 2021. And then I just became fascinated with wanting to learn, each artist, as they were sort of campaigning for their Nifty Gateway release. I wanted to find out like who they were, what made them unique, what kind of success and achievements that they had outside of, of Web3, and just learn as much as possible about them as I could. And then I used to share that information in the Discord. I would have conversations with other members. And I just sort of became obsessed with doing that and was present in the community for like 6 to 8 months, after that, and then ended up being hired at Nifty Gateway December, or at least that started December 6th of 2021. And that sort of started my journey into Web3.
Okay. So within a year of entering the space, you were already working in the space.
Yeah, that was That was pretty lucky. I was really fortunate because after I left football, I actually, and I don't share this really too often, but I actually ended up getting a certificate in IT. So I got online. I took a course and I pretty much went through the whole process on my own. Got an IT certificate, and I was working as a computer, technician. And
Mm,
during that time, like in between service calls and being out in the field, I would just be on Nifty Gateway like all day, just like just during work, after work, and I would just like, be on the Discord and chatting with people. And then, after that is sort of when that opportunity came about, and when I was asked if I was interested in the opportunity, I was like, this is exactly what I have been doing, even while I was working. So
yeah,
it was the perfect time to transition. Yeah.
fabulous. And so how did you first learn about Tezos and its ecosystem?
So Tezos, I learned about it in 2021. Around that time, I was around Nifty Gateway because our team, it was about 6, 7 of us. Two particularly of my colleagues collected on Tezos. My boss was big on Tezos, and so I dove into it, but I wasn't very I didn't consistently collect on it. So it was very casual at that point because my
Okay.
my full attention was completely on the day-to-day, on ETH and everything that was happening there. Because part of my role was to incorporate or make sure that we offer any of the, projects or artists that were, having success on ETH on Nifty Gateway. And so that was kind of like where my focus was. And then I remember purchasing a piece on Tezos through a mutual friend that sort of onboarded me through it. And then after that, I didn't collect. And then I would say like around 2022 to 2023, I started collecting more. But I've had multiple wallets since. I've actually lost access to the first one. And I've created multiple wallets then and have collected on object. Didn't collect on Hickenug. I didn't collect Hickenug, but I did on object and have since.
Okay. And as you were sort of exploring the space, what was it about this ecosystem in particular that appealed to you and made you become more involved?
Yeah. I love sort of the attitude of Tezos. I love that art remains the focus and people want that to be the focus. I love the openness of it. And I think when you look at the state of the market of the ecosystem right now, I feel like Tezos, is the closest to the true ethos of decentralization. You know, it's kind of like open to all, for all, by all, and people just want to do cool stuff. And again, just just share art, create art, put it when when it feels right, without having to deal with the politics of everything else that goes on, on other ecosystems. And it's less about hype and more about substance. And I think that really deeply resonates with me.
Mm,
And I've always felt like an underdog, in my life. And I love the underdog story. I love, helping people. So I felt like this was a great place for me to be at. It's normally the situations that I go into, where I can actually help people and make an impact. So I thought this was a great situation and role to step into.
okay. And as you've entered the ecosystem more deeply, what is that journey engaging with the community been like, and what types of tools and platforms have you engaged with?
Yeah. So at first it was rough. It was rough because I was ruffling feathers. That's number one. Two, I was asking some questions that, rubbed off people the wrong way, but I did so intentionally because I wanted to know. One, I wanted people to feel, I wanted people to take a stance. on how they felt. So I could really truly understand what people stand for within the ecosystem and where their values lie and on which side of the line that they're on.
Mm.
So the first week, I there was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of conversation about here comes this guy from ETH that is clueless to Tezos, that is trying to turn Tezos into ETH and wants to like highlight sales and wants sort of the money to be the conversation, uh, rather than the art and the substance of everything surrounding art and artists. But that wasn't the case. I just wanted people to sort of I wanted to get a sense, a feel of like where the community was at, sort of get their feedback and make sense of it all, and also understand where I can come in and bring value. But since then, it's been great. I've been, tapping into different communities, join Discord, groups and channels and Telegram, listen to different Twitter spaces, and I'm just trying to like learn as much as possible, before I take a stance myself, and also see where I can add value, to people, to the community, and really show up for them in a intentional way. And
Okay. And you are now, as I mentioned earlier, growth and partnerships lead at Object.
yeah, yeah.
How much can you tell us about how your relationship with Object took shape and got you to this point?
Yeah, I think it was from knowing multiple of the team members on Object and passing through through IRL events and over the years. Um, and the role sort of came to my attention, after my last role at Makers Plays. The company ended up, ceasing operations. And so I made a post about sort of being out of a role and wanting to still be active in the ecosystem. And so that's kind of like how the conversation begun between us. They explained to me that there was a role, and I also had others within the community, on both sides, reach out to me and say like, "Hey, you could be a good fit for this role."
Mm.
And so after conversations and talking to both sides and talking to multiple people, I felt like I aligned with the ethos of, Tezos. I deeply resonated with the community and sort of the attitude and outlook. And I did like the scope of the work. It's partnerships, it's growth, it's relationship building, it's working with artists, working with multiple partners, and that's an area that I've always enjoyed, being in and being a part of. So I felt like things aligned, really well with the role. But if I didn't believe in the ecosystem, if I didn't believe in the opportunity and the role, then I wouldn't have taken it. But it all worked out, and I'm super happy where I am.
Okay. Well, I'm curious about the role, but I'm
Yeah,
also aware that not everybody who's watching might necessarily know exactly what Object is. So, for
yeah,
those who might be in that position, how would you describe Object and what it does?
yeah. I think as I mentioned before, I see Object as an open platform that's decentralized, that allows artists from all over the world to take part, in Web3. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's accessible to all. I think also as a collector, you have the ability to come in and collect no matter, sort of like your budget. And I think that's very important to have in this space because, a lot of the headlines are dominated by higher volume, higher sales,
Mm.
and not everyone has the ability to take part in those sales and those opportunities. So you do need a platform or solution that's completely open to all. That everyone can be a part of, and I think that's what, Object is, and so it has an important sort of like, value and mission within the space.
Okay. And now you're a part of that value and mission.
Yeah,
So, what exactly does a growth and partnerships lead at object.com do? What
yeah,
does your day to day in that role look like so far?
yeah. Where I wear a lot of hats. My main focus is growing, the object community, growing the Tezos ecosystem. It's also about retention, looking at our current, creators, collectors, facilitating those relationships, but also considering how we can, grow the pie for everyone. So it's a healthier ecosystem. It's something that I've spoken about before where, several times during the last couple of months, you've had people, say we're in a bull market and it's a bull run, and sales are happening, but they're happening within the 1%, and the rest of the artists are struggling. And given my perspective, know that that's not healthy. It's not the promise that we were promised when we first started in Web3. It was like everyone gets a piece of the pie, right? But not everyone is really eating a piece of the pie, or has a piece of the pie. So um, I think my role is helping expand the pie, thinking about new opportunities, bringing in new collectors, bringing in new creators, and thinking about ideas that we can also show up, for the community. Because I think that's what makes Tezos really special and unique is the community. So increasing, relationship with the community, but also growing the community and doing it in a way that's healthy, uh,
Mm.
and true to the ethos integrity of Tezos. So every single day, every single week, I'm consistently like wearing different hats. One week, I'm focusing on, partnerships.
Yeah.
Another week, collectors outreach. Another week, I'm thinking about, creators and thinking about community. And so I feel like every week I'm switching between hats, and I absolutely love it.
Okay. And in the service of growing the pie, as you put it,
Yeah,
I realize you probably can't get too much into specifics, but in a general sense, what kinds of partnerships are important for a marketplace like Object to foster?
yeah. I think the number one is retaining and being in good standing with the community. I think that's very important, right? Like people think partnerships, people think growth as we're thinking about everywhere else that's outside of our bubble, right? And yes, that is an area that I'm completely thinking about every single day. But at the same time, you can't negate the community and everything that they've done over the years to show up and make it worthwhile, um, and making Tezos what it is. So it's important to maintain and foster those relationships and think about ways that we can also show up for them, so that they feel heard, seen, and validated. So that's like a focus as well.
Okay.
And having Twitter Spaces, opportunities for open calls for collaboration is something that we want to continue to do. And I strongly believe that is the way of Tezos. Collaboration, community.
Okay. And in those conversations that you would be having working towards that, what's the value proposition of an ecosystem, an art ecosystem like that of Tezos and a platform like Object for the people that you're working with?
In terms of new partners or sort of having conversations within the community.
I would say in terms of working with partners and artists.
Yeah, I mean, the value prop is in the community. I really believe that. It's also in the collaboration. It's also in the ideas, right? So it's bringing fresh ideas, bringing opportunities that could be inclusive, because that's what makes Tezos unique. I also think as a platform within the Tezos ecosystem, it's one of the things that you can add value. It's one of the ways you can add value. It's community initiatives that brings people together, that gives equal opportunities to all, and continues to drive the conversation, with art on the forefront of that. So that's I think that's something that's very important, because of course every ecosystem offers something that's unique. We know what we are and what makes Tezos unique,
Mm,
and we want to stay close to that, and not try to become something else that we're not.
yeah. And I think, you know, the art community here has been an area of strength in the Tezos
Yeah,
ecosystem for quite some time.
right.
Why do you think that the Tezos ecosystem was able to build and maintain a community like that? What was it about this this place that made it a sort of fertile ground for that to happen?
Yeah, I think number one is the value of decentralization. I think it's the common DNA, sort of that people within the ecosystem, within the community understand and want to maintain. And so with that idea as sort of like the root idea, inclusion is very important. That any and everyone from anywhere, all around the world, has a space that they can come into, and be a part of something greater than themselves. And art remains the focus. And I think because of the people within the community have been so protective of that, it's allowed sort of the ecosystem to maintain that integrity and ethos. I think if people weren't as protective of it and passionate about maintaining that and protecting that idea, it would have, easily could have become something else.
Mm.
So I give credit, to the people within the community that have been very passionate about it, and have, been able to maintain, sort of the integrity of Tezos intact over the years.
Okay, and what part does object play in maintaining that?
Yeah, I think again, keeping an open platform, giving opportunities to the community to, be spotlighted, giving opportunity to the community to sort of share their voice. It's very important. I think the platform should be an amplifier, of what's already, sort of being driven within the
Hmm.
community, and then, um, allowing, the platform to serve as another extension of that. So I feel like it has to be open. It can't be highly curated. It needs to be accessible to all. And it needs to be embedded, completely embedded in the community for it to make sense, especially within the Tezos ecosystem.
Okay, and obviously one of the ways that object is able to help that process along is through running exhibitions. Am I correct in understanding that?
It's one of the ways. It's through exhibitions, it's through IRL, community events and outings. It's showing up every day in the community. It's being a resource for the community. It's having people that understand the community and that are just simply out there, right? And trying to add value and being a resource to the community, not just, representing the platform. Because, again, that's just, I feel like it doesn't do service to the ecosystem, and it doesn't sort of abide by the ethos of Web3 and Tezos.
Okay. And are there any upcoming exhibitions that people should be keeping an eye out for?
Where there is we just onboarded a gallery, One Love DAO, who's actually, just did an open call that gives an opportunity to 20 artists, to have their work, exhibited. They're going to do an exhibition, through Object, but the gallery actually has a physical location, in Miami, so there's going to be opportunities to have their work exhibited there. But that's just like one example, of the opportunities that are out there, through open calls, through community initiatives that people can take part of, to sort of, have opportunities to get their work out there. Something else that we do on Tuesdays too, which I absolutely love, from Object. On Tuesdays, our main account, shares a post as Tezos Tuesday. Share your work here. Anyone that submits their work under the post, then, I think it's within the community sort of selections, can have their work featured on the homepage the same day. That's the first time I worked at a marketplace that does or has that kind of community,
Mm,
initiative. And that's always a big topic of conversation. What goes on a homepage? Who
yeah.
decides it? Why is it the quote unquote the same names? Or there's a lot of questions, about like homepage featuring and that whole process. But again, we have the community initiative where we say, this is your day. Just submit the work. Works are selected through, the community and votes or whatever the case may be, and it's on the homepage. So it gives, again, everyone an equal opportunity to have their work featured and be part of something bigger.
Very cool. And I guess that brings sort of a level of transparency to that process so people can
Yes.
understand how those decisions are made.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. This is all great stuff so far. I'm excited to learn more. But before we dive into the nitty gritty,
Yeah, yeah.
are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
Let's do it.
Great. Then it's lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers. This is just for fun, so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Are you a night owl or an early riser?
Early riser.
Exercise or naps?
Exercise.
Movies or video games?
Video games.
What is your favorite country to visit for a vacation?
Ooh. So I'll say Dominican Republic. That's where I'm from.
Very nice. If you were elected king of the world, what's the first thing you would do?
Make sure everyone has an object account. There you go.
There you go. Name one thing you will never do again.
Skydive.
Okay, good answer. What's the secret to happiness?
Appreciation.
Lovely. Do you have any pets?
Never.
Never. Okay.
Never. My
That's
mom
the
didn't
first.
like him. Yeah, my mom didn't like him.
All right. And finally, what's your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
On a rainy day, listen to music.
Very nice. Thank you. Those were excellent answers. This concludes
Man.
the TezTalks lightning round. Let's
All
get back into it.
right.
Now that we've talked about your journey into the Tezos ecosystem and Object's role in helping blockchain powered art thrive,
Yeah.
I'd like to zoom out a little bit and chat about blockchain powered art and NFTs in 2025 a bit more broadly. Obviously, like the early stage NFT boom is now well in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
The hype around this kind of application of blockchain technology has died down significantly, and yet artists are still working in this space, and NFT marketplaces like Object continue bringing the work of those artists to the world.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, it's still. I think it's still important to push the narrative decentralization. I it's a system that has been the case. I mean, I'm talking about like traditional art world has been the artists have been under, I guess, at the mercy of that, right? And they've been fed up with it. And so decentralization, Web3 was sort of like their ability to take the control back. And I felt like we've done a good job at it, especially initially, and then we sort of lost the plot because of the headlines and the excitement, and people are making money. And I think we need to get back to that, but it's going to take some time. We're still learning, we're still growing. We're still dealing with the market conditions, as well, that are heavily influencing our day to day and the sentiment within the space. So I feel like we're just going through the learning pains right now.
Okay. And in the process of those learning pains, like how has you entered the space around 2020, around the time of that big
Yeah,
boom?
yeah,
But now you've been here for a number of years. So
yeah.
how has the NFT space changed since the time that they sort of burst onto the scene just a few short years ago?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing that comes to mind for me is, the boom I felt was just like it felt like the right ingredients, the right timing for this to grow. Just given the sort of the events we were dealing with in the world and everything that was happening, it was just like the right balance for everything to like completely, increase the attention, increase the headlines of everything that's happening, and then just like this, it was just just the right balance of all of that. I also like to think about like the product life cycle, like things are unknown to people, and then they hear the headline of the Beeple sale, and all of a sudden people want to spend their money in this specific area because other areas that they were investing in they couldn't at that point in time, and so it kind of went into digital art, and that became the latest and greatest, right? Like every news outlet wanted to report on it, but now we're a little bit more familiar with it, so things kind of like slow down. um, I think there was a lot of, excitement at the beginning. You had artists from all over the world wanting to learn about it because they heard about the opportunity to make money. They heard about royalties, and I think money was top of mind for a lot of people. And so people were willing to speculate and spend a little bit more because of it. I think after that, things slowed down. Then collectors were more intentional. They wanted to take on less risk,
Yeah.
and I think what ended up happening was that hurt a lot of the emerging artists, because collectors were willing to take less risk on the emerging artists because it was risky. Learning from 2021 that some of them left after things dried up, right? Also learning that they could get works from the more established name at a 60, 70%, 90% reduction in pricing. And yeah, that's less riskier. So it changed the dynamic of the market. It became harder for people to sell. Collectors were more intentional. And then I think within the last year and a half, you're starting to see more value accruing to the sort of the higher end market. The collections that are a little bit more established, have more capital behind it, have more consensus behind it, and then you're seeing far few in between sales happening with the emerging artists, and that's kind of like the area that I care about because
Mhm.
again, um, the promise was to give those little guys a shot, and this is supposed to be the landscape for it. So,
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, on balance, you have sort of this insane hype cycle
mhm.
very early on in the process, but
Mhm.
through a variety of factors sort of contributed to
Right, right,
this insane moment.
right,
Um, and on the one hand, that brought with it a lot of struggles. Having it go that viral that quickly
right,
created a lot of problems. But at the same time, it entered the idea of NFTs and even the word NFT sort of into the global lexicon. Like
right,
everybody was talking about this thing, and
right,
as you say, it did bring a lot of artists
right.
wanting to give it a try, wanting to experiment. On balance, was that initial hype cycle healthy for the technology or unhealthy for the technology, in your opinion?
I think I think it was healthy. I think it led to the conversation, the narrative, the headlines, the introduction. Again, I keep going back to the product life cycle. Like that's the inflection point where things just completely take off, and something that's not normal, that's not known, becomes normal
Mm,
or known, and then after that, you sort of lose the hype behind it, and then that's sort of where you built the foundation, for a larger narrative or discussion or history of it. So I feel like that's what happened with us. And like now is where the actual building is happening. And we're building that foundation for the future of what digital art is and Web3 and crypto art. But some people were just at the beginning for the excitement, for the money, for the speculation. And you know what? I don't think that's necessarily bad. We need all of the players to make up the ecosystem.
mhm.
Of course, we want more collectors, but we need to give them a reason to be here as well. It can't just be because I mint, you buy.
Yeah.
Like I don't like that logic. I think you need to give people a reason, to be excited about purchasing art on chain.
Okay. And to that end, what is I know you're relatively new at Object, but
Yeah.
from what you've learned so far, what is Object's vision for the future of digital art and NFTs?
Yeah, I still think it's a work in progress, for Object. I think the most important part for Object is to understand that there needs to be an inclusive, platform that's open to all. And we need to give people an outlet and a corner within the space to be able to come in, to grow, to experiment, to find themselves, and to be part of the ecosystem and learn who they are, what they stand for, or who they are as a collector, what do they like to collect. So you still need that open, inclusive environment that's true to the ethos of decentralization and Tezos. And I think at the base level, base layer, I think we need to be a great, be great about doing that and being that initial outlet. Beyond that is, to be determined.
Okay. And is making, minting, and selling art the ultimate application of NFT technology, or is there still a place for brands and institutions in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I still think there's opportunities for brands, institutions to come in and utilize, blockchain technology, but I don't think they've completely master that model yet. We've had some, come into play and being part of the conversation. Um, and I don't think they quite understood the undertaking, of what that meant. They thought they could just come in, you have the money, you have the name, and maybe you could align yourself with a couple of influencers or people within the space, and you have a product and longevity. And then they quickly learn, like, man, we really need to be a part of the community. This is going to take a lot of resources, a lot of finances too, more than we expected it to. And so they just wrapped up the project and moved on. So I think it can be done, but we need more intentionality, and they need to come in with an actual plan to add value, to actually be part of the community before coming in and trying to extract value or set themselves as like a major player. I'm a big believer in that, and I don't think anyone has completely yet master that. Although I there are some players out there, doing some great things. How that'll look in the long run, it's to be determined, to be seen.
Mhm.
So we'll see.
Okay. And, that was, as a part of that hype cycle, that was kind of a strange angle to it where you had this thing getting all of this attention across the globe, and then brands sort of going like, okay, well, how do we sort
Right,
of hitch our wagons to this and promote
right.
our brand and get involved? um they saw the potential early on. Do you still believe that NFTs have something to offer to brands and institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about sort of from a brand awareness expansion of the business and the direct relationship to consumer that it's available in Web3, aside from the provenance, the proof of ownership, I feel like there's still a big opportunity for brands to tap into Web3. I just again, I think they need to be a little bit more intentional, sort of with the plan and not undermine the undertaking, like of Web3 and what it can offer, but also the resources that are necessary to really show up in a meaningful way.
Mm,
It's just like with artists who are successful outside of Web3, and they come in and they think like that's going to carry into Web3. And I'm like, you have to completely realize a lot of Web2 has failed these artists and they feel like they don't have a shot. And so Web3 exists for them,
yeah.
um, and gives them an opportunity. So if someone with your background, comes into the space, they're going to be less inclined to want to support you because you're part of the reason why they haven't been successful, or you're sort of part of the ecosystem or the conversation that they couldn't get into. And so Web3 exists for them. It's supposed to be the equalizer. And I think the same thing, applies for brands. Like, sure, you have a big name behind you, but what have you done for us here?
Yeah.
And I don't think that they're not necessarily thinking about it in a long term way. It's more so like maybe this is an opportunity to overlap and expand, our footprint into this new area. And I don't think they always know how to, but I think it still can be done. I think there's definitely still opportunities. Like a great example is TMA, the Toledo Museum of Art. I know the team there; they've done an excellent job with exhibitions. They run a yearly residency, with artists. So it's in conjunction with uh, it'll be like a Web3 artist, and then they also have like maybe two artists locally that they work with as well. And then there's an exhibition for those local artists. Is their introduction into Web3. It's the first time that they've minted. So it's kind of like a win-win situation all around, and it's an initiative that they've been doing for a couple of years now. And they're a small museum, but they pack a punch, and they've been doing a great job. They showed up, they're showing up intentionally. They're adding value, and they're doing a great job with the exhibition and how they're displaying the works in the context. Also, the exhibitions, they draw a line between different conversations, different timelines in history, to the works as well, not just the digital works, but other works from other categories, and presenting that in a way that's mutually beneficial. So it can be done.
Absolutely. And like looking at Object's website today, there are stunning works of art being produced by really, really talented people.
Yep, yep.
The art itself it's amazing, right? And boundaries are being pushed, and it looks, what am I trying to say? The sort of the proposition of this being a medium for the boundaries of art to be pushed and for new kinds of art to emerge remains, right? It's really
Mhm.
about continuing to exhibit it and share it with the world. And you've described doing digital exhibitions as well as real world exhibitions where people who might not normally have access to this stuff are able to go to a gallery and look at it.
Right.
um but at this stage in the game, as somebody who is joined Object a few months ago
Mhm.
and is like, okay, let's go, let's keep this ball rolling, what excites you personally about NFTs and blockchain powered art as a medium for artistic expression?
I think for me is I think I think inclusion. I think giving people again like an opportunity. It's something that is constantly overlooked. We don't necessarily think outside of ourselves and our reality, but something that's less important to us is more important to others. And so personally, I'm just excited to keep adding value, or keep bringing in, artists, collectors from all over the world, and allowing them an opportunity to take part of this conversation of Web3 and digital art. And I'm excited for Object to be, part of that conversation and that introduction into digital art, and Web3. Because I think that's important to have. I mean, I've been part of places where you know depending on where in the world we were, like, you couldn't be included in that conversation, or curation is leading the conversation and it's excluding some, so and I mean, you've seen platforms that they were completely open, and then they're more heavily curated, so it's like, where are those artists going?
Mm,
Where's their opportunity? How can they also be part of the conversation, not be left out? So as much as I want to, like, shed the spotlight on other areas, I think it's important not to overlook that, because people need a space. People need a space, a platform, an opportunity, to also be part of the of this conversation. And so I'm excited for to continue to do that through Object. I'm excited to find ways to, grow the pie, bring in more people, bring in more collectors. Think about partnerships too that we can, work through to add more value to the community. So that's what I'm most excited about, and that's what I'm constantly thinking about every single week. How we can grow, the Tezos ecosystem, how we can give more opportunities to artists, also how we can make this fun too, because I felt like with the market conditions, it's become stressful. People are focused on charts and money and everything that's happening. um, but it should be fun. It should be fun to do this. It should be fun to mint, not only as a collector but as an artist too. So we're also thinking about, like Object, how we can make that fun for people to partake in it.
Okay. And to that end,
Yeah.
what's next for Rob De Los Santos and the Object team? Do you have anything exciting in the works?
Yeah, our focus right now is on putting programming together for the upcoming IRL events, and that's NFT NYC, NFC Lisbon, Basel in Switzerland, and yeah, that's our main focus right now, aside from like exhibitions and other community initiatives. But we really are thinking about how we can show up for the community, how we can give the Tezos community a space of belonging IRL, but also a space that they can come together, and just have fun and yeah, just be part of something bigger than themselves. I think that's very important. I'm a big fan of IRL events. I joke around and I say sometimes that you can almost tell uh, how much time has been between events, given the current sentiment of the timeline. If
Mm.
people are arguing a lot, it's been a little bit of time between IRL events, because when IRL events come around, everyone is together, taking pictures, having fun, being friendly. But when that's not the case, everyone is kind of like grumpy and going at each other's necks. So,
I definitely agree with everybody needs to meet in person once in a while. It,
yeah,
it really
it's a different
relieves
energy.
the pressure on that stuff.
Yeah, it's a different edge, because I feel like we almost forget we're humans, right? We're just
Yeah.
looking at each other's PFP, and people get grumpy and mad at each other, and then you meet in person, they're like, "Wow, you're actually not as bad as I thought." And then they become really cool friends, and it connects us, a lot more.
Agreed. We could go on all day, but unfortunately, we're coming to the end here.
Mhm.
To all our viewers, thanks for watching. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks. We'd love to hear from you. Rob, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks supporting and enabling the awesome art community here in the Tezos ecosystem. Is there anything else you want to mention or get to before we sign off here?
Yeah, I think for artists, just keep creating. Completely forget about the market and the market conditions. Just keep creating. Don't try to let it get you down. Don't fall for the conversation around charts and all that stuff. For the collectors, don't undermine sort of the impact that you can have in this space. And that's not only financially, like obviously, even just like sharing, artists that you like on the timeline, or sharing it with other collectors, retweeting, works of artists on the timeline goes a long way. And even just like sharing commentary about pieces that you like, and art that you've seen, it goes a long way. And just have fun on both sides.
Sounds like a good plan to me. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on Tez Talks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Rob De Los Santos, Growth and Partnerships Lead at objkt.com. Now let's go see what the Tezos art community is working on in 2025.